My name is Harvey Odom. I am 58 years old, and I am standing in the wrong parking lot. The church is Mount Calvary Baptist on Wesley Chapel Road in Decatur, Georgia. The parking lot is half empty. An usher is stacking folding tables near the side door. The fellowship hall lights are off. I check my phone, 2:49 in the afternoon, a Saturday in October. My daughter's text said 2 o'clock, Mount Calvary, my grandson's christening. I am wearing my good suit, the one I had made 7 years ago at a tailor shop in Nashville. Dark navy wool blend, heavy enough for a Georgia October. My late wife, Lorena, picked out the fabric. She said, "Harvey, you need one suit in your closet that makes people take you seriously." She was right about most things. In the inside breast pocket of that suit is an envelope. Inside the envelope is a personal check, written from my account at First National Bank of Georgia, $400,000. The memo line reads, "For my grandson's future." I had planned to hand it to my daughter in front of her husband's entire family, not to show off. Never that. Lorena had made me promise the day each grandchild arrived, you start their future. You put something real in their hands before the world has a chance to shake them. I dialed my daughter's number. 3 rings. When she picked up, I heard the sound that hit me first. Laughter, lots of it. The high, bright kind that comes from a party in full swing. Music underneath. A baby's voice drifting somewhere in the background. "Daddy." Her tone was surprised, a little breathless. "Hey, everything okay?" "I'm at the church," I said, "Mount Calvary on Wesley Chapel." "Baby, it's empty. Did the venue change?" A pause. Not a long one. 2-3 seconds. But I have been in business for 30 years, and I know the difference between a person who is surprised and a person who is buying time. "Oh, Daddy," her voice shifted, soft in a way that felt practiced. "Didn't you get the update? We moved it to Emmanuel Fellowship in Buckhead. We sent a group text last week." I checked my messages while she was still talking. Nothing from her, nothing from her husband, nothing. "It was this morning," she continued. 11 o'clock. "It wrapped up a couple hours ago. We're just finishing up now." She paused. It was just. Her husband's grandmother flew in from Charleston, and it was a lot to coordinate. "We'll celebrate with you, Daddy. Come for dinner next Sunday." In the background, his voice came through, low and impatient. "Hey, they're about to cut the cake." "I have to go, Daddy. I'll call you tonight. I love you." The line clicked. I stood in the empty parking lot, the Georgia sun flat and cool behind October clouds, and I looked at the check in my hand. I looked at my grandson's name in the memo line. Then I took out my phone and photographed the check. I wanted a record of what I had been willing to give. I texted the photo to my daughter with 3 words. This was his. Then I tore the check in half. The sound was clean and sharp, like a branch snapping. I folded the halves together and tore again and again, until the pieces were small enough to settle in my palm. I walked to the metal trash can near the church entrance and let them go. I drove home in my 2005 F-150 with 187,000 miles on the odometer. Sunday morning, the moment the bank opened, I confirmed the stop payment on that check number. The money was still in the account, but something else was gone, and I sat with that for a long time in my kitchen, drinking coffee, the house quiet around me. Now, before I tell you what happened 3 days later, when my daughter and her husband showed up at my front door with the wide, urgent eyes of people who had just realized what they'd thrown away, I want to hear from you. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe a parent's love should never be used as a weapon, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is just getting started. Growing up in Decatur didn't make you soft. It made you precise. You learned early which things were worth your energy and which things you let pass. My father drove a delivery truck for 30 years. My mother cleaned offices at Emory University until her knees gave out. They owned their house on Columbia Drive outright by the time I was 12. That house was their monument, a small brick ranch they had scraped and saved for, maintained like a museum artifact. It told the world, we made it, we stayed. I inherited that instinct, not the house but the drive. Build quietly, stay grounded, don't let anybody see the inside of your accounts. I spent 20 years as an HVAC contractor running a crew out of a shop in Stone Mountain. Good work, honest work. I knew every rooftop unit and ductwork configuration in a 30-mile radius. When I stepped back from active contracting at 54, most people in my daughter's life assumed that was the whole story. Harvey Odom, retired HVAC man, Decatur house, old truck. They were wrong about the most important part. In 1993, my best friend Rufus Parker and I took the money we'd both scraped together, his from a decade of accounting work, mine from years of contracting, and bought a self-storage facility in Morrow, Georgia, 40 units, a chain-link fence, and a gravel lot. People thought we were foolish. Rufus and I knew exactly what we were doing. We expanded to 80 units, then a second property in McDonough, then a small strip mall in Conyers, then a medical office building in Stockbridge when the suburban hospital system started pushing south. By the time I retired from hands-on work, Odom Parker Holdings LLC owned 11 commercial properties across Georgia, Alabama, and the South Carolina Lowcountry. The portfolio was valued somewhere around $18 million. My share was half. Rufus managed the day-to-day. I was the silent partner, the chairman he liked to call me, though I told him to stop being dramatic. I lived on my contractor pension and a modest management fee from the business. I kept the same house I'd bought with Lorena on Snapfinger Woods Drive in 1998. 3 bedrooms, a good yard, a workshop in the back where I still did small repairs on weekends because I liked the feel of it. My daughter had never once asked me about money, not the specifics. She had asked over the years, "Daddy, are you doing okay? Are you managing all right?" But those questions always carried a flavor of pity I recognized and let slide because I understood where it came from. She had married into a different world than the one she grew up in. Her husband came from a Buckhead family. His father was a cardiologist with a practice on Peachtree Road. His mother sat on the boards of 3 nonprofits and played tennis 4 mornings a week at the club. They were old Atlanta professional class, the kind that talked about lineage and legacy the way other people talked about the weather. When my daughter brought her husband home for the first time, I shook his hand and I knew. Not because he was rude, he was perfectly polite, but politeness is a container and I could see what was inside it. Calculation. He was looking at my living room, my truck in the driveway, my yard, and he was doing math. I smiled, I made everybody coffee, I played my part. Lorena was still alive then. She leaned over to me in the kitchen while the coffee was brewing and whispered, "Baby, that boy is going to be a project." I told her she was being too hard on him. She gave me the look she had perfected over 30 years of marriage, the one that said, "I am never too hard on anything and you know it." She was right, of course, she always was. Lorena died 26 months ago. A stroke in March, fast and merciless, the kind that gives you no time to prepare. She was here and then she wasn't, and the house on Snapfinger Woods felt like a building with the foundation pulled out from underneath it. My daughter came and stayed for a week. We cried together. I thought that grief might reset something between us, the way a hard winter clears out the dead wood and lets things grow back true. But grief passes and then the habits come back. After Lorena died, the calls got shorter. The conversations angled. My daughter started saying things her husband said. Things like, "Daddy, this house is a lot of square footage for one person." Or, "Daddy, have you thought about updating your will, getting everything organized?" Her husband's family had an estate attorney. Very good, very reasonable. She said it the way people recommend something they've already decided you should do. I nodded. I said I'd think about it. 3 weeks before the christening, my son-in-law came by the house alone. My daughter was at a baby appointment. He drove up in his Audi Q7 and sat in my living room, the same room where I used to help my daughter with homework, the same room where Lorena and I had slow danced to Marvin Gaye on our 25th anniversary, and he told me he was worried. He had good posture, my son-in-law, the kind you get from private school. He sat at the edge of the couch with his elbows on his knees, and his voice was careful, measured, like he was presenting a patient case to a family member who might not understand. "We've been thinking about the future," he said. "Yours specifically. My daughter and I want to make sure everything is set up right, now that Mom is gone." He paused. "This house is a lot to maintain. We want to make sure you're not overwhelmed." I told him the house was fine. I maintained it myself, the same way I always had. He smiled. The eyes didn't. He was doing the inventory again. I'd seen him do it every time he walked into this house. The eyes going to the couch, the bookshelves, the framed photographs, calculating what all of it was worth and what it would take to redirect it. "What we were thinking," he said, casual, almost bored, "is that it might make more sense for you to downsize. Something more manageable. There are some lovely active senior communities in Fayetteville. Very nice people. And the equity from this house could build something real for our little one's future." His voice warmed when he said it. "Build something for the next generation." I looked at him for a long time. He held my gaze. He genuinely believed that he was being kind. That was the most dangerous part. He had convinced himself that this was all generosity. I told him I'd think about it. He left satisfied. People always do when you tell them you'll think about it. They mistake it for agreement. That night I sat in Lorena's chair, the one by the front window, and I thought about the christening 3 weeks away, about how warm my daughter had sounded in the text. "Mount Calvary, 2 o'clock, come early if you can." And I sat in Lorena's chair in the dark and I knew, the same cold, specific clarity I used to feel before a business deal went sideways. It settled in my chest and it didn't move. The morning after the christening, I called Rufus. He answered on the second ring the way he always did. Rufus Parker did not let calls go to voicemail. He said it was how we'd built the business. A man who picks up the phone earns the deal. "Z," he said. He'd called me Z since we were in our 20s. What happened? I told him. The parking lot, the phone call, the check. A silence fell between us, not the silence of shock because Rufus was not easily shocked. It was the silence of a man shifting to a different gear. "Tell me what you need," he said. "I need to know who my son-in-law actually is," I said. "Not what I can see, what I can't." He called back Tuesday afternoon. He had done what I asked. Talked to people he trusted, pulled public records, run down what he could find through an old paralegal colleague of his who had spent 30 years reading court filings and knew a conflict of interest by smell. Here is what Rufus found. My son-in-law's father, the cardiologist on Peachtree Road, had sold his practice to a hospital network in 2019. The proceeds were reportedly significant. What was less visible was that my son-in-law had borrowed $40,000 from that transaction through a private family note to invest in a medical technology startup in 2021. The startup folded in 2022. The money was gone. He had not told his parents. He had also borrowed $22,000 from my daughter. My daughter, who had that money because I had given it to her 3 years ago. Money I'd told her was hers, no strings, because that's what parents do. She had told me it went to a home repair fund. It went to her husband's investment. She may or may not have known where it was going. Then Rufus found the last thing, the one that made the room go quiet between us on the phone. 6 weeks ago, my son-in-law had made an appointment with an elder law attorney in Midtown Atlanta. He went alone. My daughter did not go with him. Elder law attorneys handle several things: wills, trusts, long-term care. They also handle guardianship petitions. Rufus did not know what was discussed in that meeting, but he knew that in the 2 weeks after it, my son-in-law had asked my daughter twice whether I had an updated power of attorney on file. Rufus said, his voice quiet. He thinks the house is all you have. He thinks your net worth is whatever Zillow says that Decatur address is worth. I know, I said. You want to correct that impression, Rufus said. It wasn't really a question. I want to do it right, I said, slowly, cleanly, with witnesses. I called my daughter on a Thursday evening, timing it for when I knew her husband would be home. She put me on speaker almost immediately. I heard the hollow echo of it, and him moving in the background. I let my voice go thin, not a performance, just enough. Baby, I said, I've been having a hard week. I can't find some of my papers. Financial things. I got a letter from a company and I don't recognize the name. I just don't know what I'm looking at anymore. My voice caught. You know I've never been good at paperwork. Your mother handled all of that. There was a quick murmur in the background. Her husband's voice, low and focused. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard the shift in my daughter's voice when she came back to me. Daddy, don't worry. We'll come over Saturday. We'll look through everything together and make sure you're organized. That would be such a relief, I said. I just feel so turned around these days. We'll take care of it, she said. Saturday morning. They arrived at 11, both dressed like they were going to a business meeting, which in a sense they were. I answered the door in house slippers and an old cardigan. The lights were turned down lower than usual. A cup of half-drunk coffee sat on the side table. A few pieces of mail were scattered across the dining room table in the particular way of gentle disorder. I had played this role exactly twice before in my professional life, both times in negotiations where I needed someone to underestimate me before I closed. It came back naturally. Come in, I said. I shuffled. I didn't overdo it. My son-in-law's eyes went straight to the mail on the dining room table. He controlled his expression well, but I saw the thing behind it. The same inventory I had watched him take every time he walked into this house. Categorizing, calculating. My daughter hugged me. She still wore the same soft floral perfume she'd had since college, and I let the hug last a beat longer than necessary because she was still my daughter, and whatever she had allowed herself to become, none of that erased what she was to me. Daddy, she said softly, what kind of paperwork is giving you trouble? I shuffled to the table and picked up one of the envelopes, turning it over like it was written in a language I didn't quite recognize. I got this letter, I said, from a company called Odom Parker. I don't recall setting anything up with them. Maybe your mother did something before she passed? My son-in-law stepped forward. He took the letter gently from my hand. I watched him read. A quarterly income distribution statement, $14,000 and some odd dollars. 1/4 share from my stake in the business. I watched his eyebrows. Just a fraction of movement, quickly controlled. He turned the letter over. He looked at the return address. He looked at me. Sir, do you know what this company is? I don't recall, I said, shaking my head slowly. Lorena was the organized one. He set the letter down with careful neutrality. Could be an old annuity, he said. Something small that's been accumulating. I wouldn't worry about it. He wanted to know what Odom Parker was. Badly. But he couldn't ask directly without showing his hand. Then the doorbell rang. Rufus Parker rang it twice, quick and confident, the way a man rings a bell when he has somewhere to be and has made time for you specifically. My son-in-law went to the door. I watched him pull it open and encounter Rufus for the first time, and I watched the subtle recalibration happen in my son-in-law's posture, the kind of shift that occurs when a person realizes the room has changed. Rufus is 61 years old, 5'11", and he dresses the way our fathers taught us, precisely deliberately, in a way that communicates that your time is not to be wasted. Charcoal three-piece suit. Pocket square folded to a clean quarter-inch. A leather briefcase he has carried for 20 years. He looked at my son-in-law the way you look at a door that is slightly in your path and stepped past him. He came into the living room. He looked at me in my cardigan with my half-drunk coffee, and his face went warm in a way that was entirely genuine. Just my name, but with a full conversation inside it. Then he straightened up, looked at my daughter and her husband, and the warmth became professional. "I'm Rufus Parker," he said, "Harvey's business partner." My daughter blinked. "Business partner?" My son-in-law had gone very still. Rufus set his briefcase on the dining room table and opened it. Snap, snap, the two brass latches like a gavel. He pulled out 3 folders and laid them in a row. He picked up the quarterly statement my son-in-law had just set down, held it up briefly, then placed it back on the table. "I see you've already found one of these," he said pleasantly. "Let me help you understand what you're looking at." He opened the first folder, the corporate summary for Odom Parker Holdings LLC. 11 properties, total assessed value, distribution history going back 30 years. My son-in-law looked at the first page. I watched his jaw, I watched the muscles in it go still. "Harvey and I started this company in 1993, Rufus said. He is the silent co-owner. The silence was his choice and his design. He tapped the bottom figure on the portfolio page. As of last quarter, Harvey's 50% stake in this company is valued at approximately $9.2 million. The room did not make a sound. My daughter's hand came up to cover her mouth. She was looking at me, at the cardigan, at the slippers, at the man she had understood her whole life to be her modest, practical, slightly behind-the-times father, and I could see the thing cracking open behind her eyes. "But that's not the only reason I'm here," Rufus said. He set the portfolio folder aside and picked up the second. He placed on the table a document summarizing public records and a paralegal's written account of the categories of legal consultation offered at the Midtown firm my son-in-law had visited 6 weeks ago. Guardianship proceedings, conservatorship filings, power of attorney acquisition under incapacity claims. My son-in-law started to speak. "I was only exploring options," he said, the voice of a man retreating to a position he believes is defensible, in case he ever needed someone to manage his affairs, Rufus said, finishing it cleanly. "I understand," he set the folder down. "Here is what I need you to understand." He opened the third folder, 2 notarized documents. The first was a full cognitive assessment performed the previous week by a neurologist at Emory University School of Medicine, signed, affirming that Harvey Odom demonstrated complete and intact cognitive function across every evaluated domain. The second was a deed of trust. "This document," Rufus said, placing it on the table, "transfers Harvey's interest in the Snapfinger Woods property into an irrevocable trust in your son's name." My grandson's name was at the top. I had signed it 6 days ago, before this moment, but not before I understood enough to know it was necessary. "The house," Rufus continued, "belongs to your son now, not as an asset to be leveraged, not as equity to be redirected. It belongs to a child who has done nothing to deserve being used. Harvey and I are the sole trustees until the boy turns 25. You," he looked at my son-in-law, "have no standing, no claim, and no access." My son-in-law looked at the deed. He looked at me. He looked at the deed again. The thing he had come to catalog and calculate and eventually acquire, the house, the equity, the quiet old man's only visible asset, was now entirely beyond his reach. He had walked into this living room with a plan, and every component of that plan was gone. My daughter had not moved. She was still standing with her hand at her mouth, and the look on her face was one I had not seen since she was very small, open, stripped of everything she had built up around herself, the face of someone confronting a truth they cannot renegotiate. "Daddy," she whispered. I looked at her. I kept my voice even. "Your grandfather left your grandmother exactly nothing," I said. "Your grandmother left your mother $40 in a coffee can and a paid-off house. Your mother and I left you a name, an education, and the understanding that you build your own life. I didn't tell you about the business because I wanted to see what kind of person you'd become without a net. I wanted to see who you'd choose to be when you thought no one important was watching." I turned to her husband last. "I was standing in the wrong parking lot on the day my grandson was baptized," I said. "I want you to think very carefully about whether that was the last mistake you want to make in this direction." He picked up his keys from where he'd set them when he arrived. He walked out. He did not look back. My daughter stayed. She stayed for 4 hours. She sat at the kitchen table and she cried and she asked questions and I answered them as honestly as I could. And by the time the afternoon light went flat and gold through the kitchen window, we had arrived somewhere new, not the same place we had been, but somewhere real. 7 months later, I was in the office of Odom Parker Holdings on Old Dixie Highway, reviewing a prospective acquisition in Huntsville, Alabama, when my daughter called. She asked if she could bring the baby by Sunday for dinner. I said yes. She asked if she should bring anything. I said no. I said I'd make Lorena's baked chicken, the one with the lemon and the garlic and the little bit of cayenne you don't taste until the very end. And my daughter laughed. The full-body kind, the kind I had not heard from her in a long time. Her husband did not come to Sunday dinner. They were working things out between them, and whatever happened there was between them. I was not owed an apology from a man like that. I had already taken back everything that was mine to take. What I wanted was simpler than that. I wanted to sit at the kitchen table on Snapfinger Woods Drive and watch my grandson taste mashed sweet potato for the first time. Lorena used to say it every time we had the grandchildren of friends over. Watch their faces, Harvey. Everything important is in the face. So that Sunday, I sat at the kitchen table in the house that had been ours, and I held my grandson in my lap, and I did exactly that. I watched his face. Everything important was in it.